Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and today we're looking at a game engine called ct.js, and this one is very, very easy to use. It's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. It is free open source under the MIT code license, and yeah, let's just jump in and take a look at it. Again, you're going to find this quite simple to use as long as you can tolerate the JavaScript programming language. You can find ct.js available at ctjs.rocks. We'll get back to some of the other details, GitHub, etc. in a second, but first I figured we'd just go straight out hands-on with this engine. And here we are. So this here is ct.js's launch page. You can switch between a variety of different languages available up here, and you can also launch a number of different example projects to get you up and started. I'll show you one of the more involved examples here. It's the dungeon crawler tutorial. You're going to see initially you come to the project page. It's straightforward. You set your version, who built it, and so on. This is all used as part of the building process. We'll come back to the project settings in just a second. On top of that, you have your texture setting. This is your game assets. Basically, you can import in new things to add. These are the things that you will use in your game. You can also use tile sets, tile maps, and so on. You can also bring in skeletal animations, actually. So you have the import option. You want to bring anything in, bring this one in as a JSON file, for example. So that is what the texture area is all about. You also have tools here for UI for creating text styles and fonts. You have a special effects editor available right here. So let's just zoom in and take a look at the effect in action. Not the most exciting effect you've ever seen, but over here you can see the controls handling it. So we can add particle effect emitters and so on to control scaling, gravity, spawning, and such over time. You have a control here for your sounds. You can preview your sound system and so on. Now, there is one thing that just drives me nuts about this game engine, and this is the best feedback I can give to the developer. This having the only option here of saving and not canceling or exiting it out. You do this consistently with your UI, and it is very, very confusing. And it is especially confusing when we get to rooms. I will show you that in just a second. Next up, we have templates. You can think of templates like prefabs. So, for example, we saw here we have a cat right here, a number of things attached to said cat, but you'll notice the cat is actually available over here. So the various different frames of the cat are being used here in this template. So this is where you'd go about creating your game objects. You're going to notice here down the left-hand side, there are a number of events. So on the frame start, you run this particular code. By the way, this is an integrated code editor, and as you will notice, there is text completion. So that is definitely a nice way to go about things. This, for example, is where you would ultimately set your game logic up for your particular characters. You have integration into the documentation, by the way. And we've also got over here, these are the various different events that you can fire. So when it's clicked on, when an animation plays, when a timer ends, and so on. So this is how you hook up your logic. Now, once again, the only option I have here to go back to the menu and look at the next template is done. Now, what if I don't want to save my changes? What if I want to exit out? Done is kind of confusing. Now, again, we'll go back to room, and this is where it's most obvious. Now, this is where all of the various different parts of your game string together. For example, here is your starting page that comes in. By the way, middle mouse button to navigate around. You can zoom in and out. You got a grid you can snap to. Again, you can hook up your game logic here on a scene-by-scene basis. So, for example, up here, events. Now, this guy doesn't have any events attached to it, but there are various different events that you can fire off when a room is loaded, etc. So how do I get out of here? Well, my only option is done. How do I get out of here? Okay, well, if I want to go back to the main view, I have to hit save. This makes no sense. So from a UI perspective, please take a look at it. By the way, that save button does not work at all on macOS, so I actually spent like 20 minutes trying to figure out how to actually get out of this room. But as you can see, here is a tile-based map editor built into this guy. You can create multiple rooms. You can apply various different bits of logic to things. Once again, any entity here can be defined in the templates and have logic attached to it. Speaking of entities, there are a variety of them right here. So if I want to spawn a door into the room, I go into door mode, and I just basically start painting doors in my map. Pretty simple stuff. And then you can select them over here. You can change the values. You can scale and resize things using the manipulator. It's a nice integrated editor. You've also got the ability to apply custom properties to each instance, which you could then use in your logic as well. You'll notice this guy is animating, so that means that the guy, it's basically running it as if the engine was running. So if you have physics on or logic attached to a character, that is what you are seeing in action. So the logic code behind cat, all of this stuff, so the frame start, frame end logic, all of this stuff is being run each frame over here in the room editor. So that is how it all works. I'll show you a really simple example so you can understand how it all kind of strings together. And yeah, that's kind of the idea behind it. If you want to go ahead, get some help, available over here. So this walks you through the tutorial. I don't really want to do that. There is a full manual. We'll get back to that in a second. There is this notes. There's documentation available right here, so sort of reference for the various different aspects of the code and so on. You have the learning material all available over here, so it's in this little pop-out window to the side. So yeah, and you can pop that back in over there. So that is all available on demand over here. Here you got tools for background. We have one here for just the settings of your level in general. It can be a UI layer or not a UI layer. And then when you want to go ahead and test your game out, just hit the launch button. And there you see an example game. So this is the kind of stuff that you can create. Now, another interesting thing from a UI perspective, I don't see a stop. I see start and restop. So it's a little confusing how you actually leave here. By the way, you just leave. But again, not the most intuitive from the UI perspective, and everything else is really quite clear. Now, another really cool thing here is you go back into your project settings, you're going to find a couple of other things in here. So you got tools here like branding. So you set your game icon, your splash screen, and so on. This is what will load up on the game when it first launches. You can set up your action and input, so you can have keyboard controllers and so on. You can create action mappings, so you use the command move X instead of the actual keys over here. You've got this part, which is probably the most interesting. This is basically custom extensions to the engine itself. So if you want to make things pseudo 3D, you could just basically turn this guy on, and then boom, you got things in here. So you got special filters you could apply in here. They are available right there. So now you can extend the engine quite simply using a variety of modules available over here. That is quite nice. On top of that, we've also got render settings, so you can say it full screen, maximize windowed, etc. Set the maximum frame rate to keep the power consumption down and so on. And then a couple of these mods that we've added in, those things from right here, have their settings exposed down here. So there's a lot of stuff that you can extend that the community has provided for you. So if you need added keyboard events to the action system, well, that one's actually already enabled. You just click that one, and then it adds it in. So if you need to have a random number generator or a sprite composer, etc., you literally could just click them and add them. You've even got the ability to work with Yarn, which is a text-based editor. You can turn that on right here. So let's look at a very basic example. So what you do here is when you first start it up, so we'll start from the start menu, and I'll go ahead and not save anything. You go to the examples and check out Space Shooter Tutorial. Sure, we'll open the recovery version of it. Now you're going to notice when you first load this one up, there's only this one room, and there's a spaceship in it. Not much going on, and the room has simple events right here. So this is where your scoreboard is being added up and so on. Gives you an idea of how things actually work. This is how the code is actually run. So again, these are being called, so every single frame, at the end of the frame, you're updating the score on your lives, for example. The asteroids here, you're spinning them around, or you're randomly creating them every once in a while. Ships, everything else, it's all being spawned this way. Now you're going to notice we also, in the room itself, so again, how do I get out of here? I have to click done. That's very unintuitive. Come over here to templates. You're going to go ahead and find player ship, like so. And yeah, so this guy is when it's first started, or so when you press shoot, or when you collide with something, this is the code, obviously, that would kill you. This is the only entity being created. The other ones were being created dynamically by code. So again, when we spawn an asteroid, for example, you see a ct.templates.copy asteroid big and asteroid medium. So you're randomly grabbing one of those two things. We'll go back over here and we'll look at the logic for, so again, to get out of here, done. Asteroid big, for example, here you can see the code controlling its logic, where it goes, frame rate, and so on. Very simple stuff. So that is how you string your game together. I think the structure is fairly intuitive. Again, you bring your assets in that you're going to work with. You can bring in UI elements. So here you can see some text styles being created, setting up, sizes and so on. Fill, stroke, shadow, so you can create this kind of funky text from the font. Again, I have to click apply to close this, even if I don't want to save my changes. A very strange UI, the only thing I dislike. And then, of course, you could bring in your own TTF file to bring in and create stuff as well. You have the simple particle effects generator. It's simple. It's straightforward. The JavaScript language isn't that bad. There's some nice documentation we'll see in just a second for working with it. And here you got a couple of other tools. One thing you'll notice, you can theme it. So eye warning, some of this might get bright. So there's this one. Unfortunately, the dark high contrast screen, this yellow, it does not work well in this setting here because it's actually whatever is currently selected sometime. Okay, so it's only on first load. You noticed how that cursor was not displayed. But you'll see here, you do have a number of different settings available for the theming. You got a couple others. You can switch out your code fonts and so on. Zoom the entire thing in and out. So if your vision is poor, you can do so right here. Yeah, so that is the end of the hands-on portion of ct.js. It's easy to use. It's easy to work with. You could create a game in a weekend. It's well documented. It has a decent community. They are available on Discord, etc. So let's go take a look at a few more details. So again here, they call it a 2D game editor. I think they should change that to engine because it's misleading. I would think an editor is for other engines, and there's actually no ability to export here. Now that is something I didn't cover. Sorry about that. You can also build your game. So building your game is just a matter of click one of these buttons. And literally in this case, you just click the button and it's done. But if you want to do a desktop build, you pick the platforms you want to build for, and it will download the needed dependencies and build it for you. And again, another UI thing, hide instead of close. So weird changes for toggling and closing things down. You can also build for Android here as well, but there's no ability to export out a map. So this isn't a competitor to like LTTK or Tiled Editor or something like that. This is not really a third-party map editor. It's an all-in-one 2D game engine, basically. They did just release version 3 and then followed it up with 3.01. It is beginner-friendly. It's built on top of the PixiJS environment. You can build web games here quite easily. It's got, again, integrated editors. Physics are built in there, framed and skeletal animation, music, particle effects, documentation is there. You can create your own custom JavaScript. You can make your own modules to extend it. It is available in a variety of different platforms, so Windows, Linux, and Mac, in a variety of different ways, including just basically a zip file that you extract and run, or web installers, you name it. It's available. It's also available up on itch.io. The documentation is solid, so you can read the documentation available right here. They do have tutorials that walk you through. So, for example, that space shooter game, this will walk you through the various different pieces of making things work, everything you need to know, all of the code involved, everything you need to know to create your own space game. There are a few of those such tutorials, one for Flappy Bird style game, one for platformer. All of those sample projects are also available from the launcher. So these are the updates in 3.0. I'm not going to really pay much attention to the actual new release because if you're interested, you can check that one out in more detail. There also is a cheat sheet, so a set of 3 pings that kind of walk you through simple concepts. So, for example, if you want the code to switch between rooms, to append a UI layer and so on, cheat sheets are actually pretty handy. So if you're looking for how to do a specific thing, they got 3 pages of sample code to show you how to go about doing common tasks. As I mentioned earlier on, this is an open source project. It is under the MIT license. If you do not know your open source licenses, MIT is very liberal in what it allows you to do. It allows you to do basically whatever you want. So you can create commercial games with this. You can fork it and create your own version of it, whatever you wish to do. MIT generally allows you to do it. So it's a very permissive license, not something to be worried about in the slightest. So again, it is available open source as well, and they are available as releases there. You'll see from the release schedule, it's updated fairly consistently. So the big release was back in September the 9th for the 3.0 release. And then since then, 3 days later, it's kind of like a hot fix release. So if you want to really get into the details of what is new in 3.0, all of the details are available right there. Also, one thing you probably want to be aware of, this is built on top of PixiJS. It's a WebGL renderer and 2D library and does a little bit more than that as well. If you've never checked out PixiJS and you want to create your own equivalent to something like ct.js, PixiJS is a really cool framework. It's a little bit lower level than, say, a Phaser, but they're kind of similar in what they do, although I think Phaser actually builds on top of PixiJS, or at least it used to. So if you need like a fast WebGL cross-browser rendering layer for making 2D style games, that is what PixiJS is all about. Plus, this web effect is actually really kind of cool. So, okay, I got to stop. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here and keep spinning. But as you see, it's being used by tons of different brands for tons of different projects. So, PixiJS is a very powerful framework, and that is what ct.js is built upon. So that was ct.js 3.0. Again, they call it a game editor. I would call it a game engine. I guess it's a matter of semantics. Again, my only real complaint, and I keep harping on about it the entire time I was doing this, is I really wish that they would do these changes are not intuitive. So if I work on something, I make a change, the only way to get out of this editor, to get back to the room, to get back to that launch screen, unless I'm missing something, the only way I can get out of this screen is to click the save button. And what if I don't want to save my changes? That is bad UI, but that's my only complaint. Very small thing. If you're the author, hopefully that was useful feedback. But if you haven't checked this one out, ct.js, again, if you like the JavaScript language, looking to create 2D games, could be a nice engine for you to check out. Let me know what you think. Comments down below. I'll talk to you all later. Goodbye.